On Real Estate for Real Life podcasts, we sit down with standout business leaders to unpack what's actually working.
How they scale, lead teams, win clients, and build businesses that last. We're your hosts. I'm Courtney Gouchman.
And I'm Ryan Wilson. Thanks for tuning in. Welcome. We are here today with Jeff Siegel, men's wellness coach, recent author, and educator. Thanks so much for joining us, Jeff.
Yeah, thank you, Ryan. Happy to be here.
Yes. We're pumped to have you. Known you for a couple of years now. Why don't you just get right into it? Tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us kind of how you got started, and tell us about your book that just got published in October of last year, which is very exciting.
Yeah, so I just released a new book called Eating 2.0, How to Eat Confidently in an Ultra-Processed World. And the impetus for writing this book, look, it was actually totally tied into my own personal eating, and having an eating disorder as a teenager. And so when I was 14, I basically, starved myself almost to the point of death. And I had to drop out of high school. It was a really, really difficult period for me, for my family, for my friends. It's so confusing. That is when I knew that my relationship with food and eating was going to color the rest of my life. And it was kind of coming out of that experience. And I had so much support from my family, from therapists, from other coaches and friends that helped me kind of pull me up out of this dark place. And, it was a long road to healing. And, there was many years after that where, kind of trying to find my footing in what I was eating and how do I take care of myself and how do I be healthy. And on one hand, I just wanted to be like a normal, strong, healthy teenage guy. And then on the other hand, I had such a disordered relationship with food and was really afraid of, any sort of carbs and fats and sugars. And so, it was this kind of initial incident that I think really wanted me to figure out what the heck happened. Why did my mind go to war with my body in this way that caused so many problems? And so after that, I went on to study neuroscience and behavioral biology, and I got a really good understanding of kind of why the body does what it does from a physiological perspective and metabolism and nutrition. But I felt that only kind of covered half the picture. So after college, I actually left the States. I moved out to Asia. First, I was living in Malaysia. Then I was living in Hong Kong. And while I was out there, I was starting my career as a teacher. And I was also then studying Buddhism and Eastern philosophy, really trying to understand like what makes a life worth living. Because I was a little bit disillusioned by this Western scientific reductionist view of the body. And then ultimately, I ended up back at Harvard as a place to try to integrate the sort of Eastern and Western, the mind and the body. How can we help people live healthier and happier lives? And ultimately, how can I help other people, and especially men, avoid some of the pitfalls that I fell into when it came into my disordered relationship with food. So that, sort of the backstory that leads up to this whole book, which, there's so much in it about how can we form a better relationship with ourselves and with the food that we're eating.
Wow, that is incredibly interesting. And from your findings, right, I don't want to ask you something that's too personal, but
ask away. Ask away. We're here. We're open.
But like as a 14-year-old, right, struggling with food and the eating disorder situation, was it physical in terms of like you wanted to be thinner, or was it just more a control thing? Because I've heard a lot of different conversations about when their mind basically starts to, react and like prevent them from eating food. Disorders can be a lot of different dynamics of why you're doing what you're doing. A lot of times with females, it has to do with dancers, gymnastics. It's a lot of the, physically, it's like what you're seeing. It's how you want your body to look. But I have also heard, I have 6-year-old daughters, right? And for me, sometimes it can be a control thing. It's the one thing that you can control 3 times a day during your meals. And it's when the rest of your world feels very chaotic, that can be something that you lean into. So I'm just kind of curious, like, did you find out like the root problem and the root cause?
Yeah. I mean, I think both of the things that you named are very real and important pieces of it. And I think it's very layered. It's very multifaceted. Definitely there's a control piece. Definitely there is a body image piece. Yep. I felt both of those to be true. And obviously the body image piece looks very different for men than for women,
Mm-hmm.
and there's no question that I think our society is way more forgiving of male bodies being different shapes and hairiness, and also, and there's way stricter, social ideals that we place on women's bodies in terms of what is considered acceptable and sexy and desirable. And all that being said is, yes, men I still think do sometimes struggle with, especially when I look back at myself as a teenager and, puberty, hormones kicking in, sexual desire kicking in. I'm looking around like my older peers going to the weight room, building muscle. So like on one hand, I just wanted to be one of these like strong guys, like cover of Men's Health and Fitness magazine. And then on the other hand, there was this control perfectionism piece, as you were saying, as I am learning about the world and how enormous and crazy and how many things there are that I can't control. And I'm like, oh yeah, I can control. I can control exactly what I eat. I can control exactly how many calories or grams of protein that I have in my day. And then what starts as sort of like a fun little nutritional number game can easily start to spiral, especially in the mind of a young teenager, where I think I didn't quite have the sophistication to be able to manage the stress that I was having at that time. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, and you're a men's health coach, right? Health and wellness coach. What age are like your clients typically? And like, is there an age that's too young to
Yeah.
start with something like that?
It's a great question of, too young. I don't think it's ever too young to have somebody show up in your life and say, I'm here for you. I care about you. Like, I want to listen, and how can I support you? When I look back on my period of illness, there was a few people, some teachers, some coaches that saw I was struggling and that pulled me aside. And were just there as like listeners and supports, not trying to fix me, not trying to convince me other things, but like really just to feel like they could see me and understand that I was having a difficult experience and wanted to do something. So I think that kind of allyship and support, is so vital, and especially for teenagers, like it's because that's such a tumultuous time. As an adolescent, you're trying to figure out, who am I? How do I fit in with my peers? Like this adult world suddenly is like this new thing. It's coming closer. You're like, I'm not a kid anymore, but I'm also not like my parents. And I think that's something our culture is missing, is a lot of rites of passages for young men and women too. But in a lot of other kind of more indigenous and traditional cultures, the young men would go through some sort of ordeal that was guided by elder men in the community. And there was like an initiation to that. And I think that that's something that we've really lost in our society. And as a result, I think young men are kind of looking for some sort of guidance and not knowing where to find it. And especially now, you look online into, the social media, and there's the whole manosphere of influencers that are capturing, I think, the attention of young men that are looking for some sense of belonging, trying to make sense of the world that they're in, which is a crazy world, and not knowing what it means to be a man in today's world. And so I think that we could be doing a better job providing supports for young men in terms of mentorship, leadership, and whether that is in sort of a one-on-one coaching thing or whether that's more of a community-based thing. I know I didn't really answer your question of like, who do I work with? I work mostly with adult men, professionals, fathers. I occasionally work with college students or people that are kind of right out of college. And that just, tends to be a sweet spot in terms of, I think as a young kid, especially if we're talking about health issues, unless you're like I was, at a point of really severely disordered behavior, you can get away with a lot, right? Like a lot of the poor eating habits, poor sleeping habits, not taking care of yourself, like they're not going to show up when you're 19 or even when you're 29. But when you're 39, when you're 49, when you're 59, like all of a sudden those things become so much more salient. And I think a lot of the people that I work with, right, begin to see that, hey, the path that I am on is not sustainable. And I think actually a really great question. This is an important question for everybody listening, is like to ask yourself, if I stayed on this path for the next 2, 3, 5 years, where would I end up?
Yeah.
Right. And one thing that I often come back to is like, if you repeated today, right, tomorrow, the next day, again and again and again for the next 3 to 5 years, who would you become? Are you going to be the person that you want to be, or are you just going to be a kind of slow, decaying version of yourself?
Yeah.
That's really interesting. I mean, it's really cool. I know that you mainly deal with like high performing professionals and kind of help them maintain or improve their health without sacrificing, their health essentially, which is really, really great. What would you not go back necessarily you as a teenager, but looking back, like what would you tell yourself, knowing all the things you know now? Obviously, you need that, help and support. And you said coaches and teachers and family gave you that support, but like, what would you tell yourself now that you are an expert in this field?
Yeah.
And a
Ryan,
14-year-old.
I love that question. It's something that I think about all the time. It's like, what message would I want to give to my younger self? And what message do I want to give to like just the younger generation in general of like, how can you show up as a healthy, mature, compassionate, kind, wise, all of these things that I think we want our, for those of us who are parents, like the things that we want our kids to become. I think something that I would have really loved to hear was that it's not my job to solve the world's problems. And that started in my home of like, things with my parents, like, it's not my job to make my parents happy or if they're having a hard day. That doesn't mean I can't obviously want to be there and do something for them. But I think as a young person, it's very easy to get enmeshed emotionally and you take on more than you really need to take on. And then, when you look out in the world and you're like, wow, there's a lot of things that are broken. There's a lot of things right now that are really seem like they're going sideways or backwards. And on one hand, I think that's incredibly motivating. Like that's important. And we need young people to pay attention to these problems and do something about it and feel that initiative. But when you make it your whole identity to solve that, then it can become really overwhelming. And I think that is way more pressure than any single person was meant to carry. And especially for men, where I think this kind of comes in when we think about the legacy of patriarchy and a lot of this sort of man mindsets around independence and self-reliance and individualism. And it's like, I can do this all on my own. And if I ask for help, I must be weak. And I don't want to be seen as weak. And so it makes it that much harder, I think, for guys to accept that, hey, I can't do this on my own. I was never meant to do this on my own. This was always meant to be a group effort. We need help. We need each other. And so I think breaking out of some of those boxes is really vital.
Yeah. Wow. That's really inspirational. I love the way you said all that. So now you're obviously educating, professionals, whether it be executives or entrepreneurs, or typically people that are probably getting your help and support are people that are in super, super high stress environments, right? And they're wanting to learn more about health in all aspects. It could be food and eating. It could be, exercise. It could be mindfulness, as we know you're, professor at Harvard in teach mindfulness class at the graduate school. Proper sleep, all these different things. So let's get into at least a hot topic right now is food, and it's all over the news as far as all of these different things and all of the food that we eat, frankly, every day. And
the ultra processed foods.
It seems impossible to eat properly.
Yeah.
And
but then not just that, also like given our age range, right? Like we're constantly hearing, oh, you need to be taking this supplement. You need to be taking that supplement.
Yeah.
Oh, you need this many grams of protein. You need this much water. You need this much fiber, right? Like it's like there's just this constant consuming amount of conversation around health and wellness. Yet the foods at most of our grocers are still filled with more, chemicals and poor ingredients, and we're constantly seeing things are coming out as what carcinogenics or
carcinogens.
Carcinogens.
I mean, it's like the Cheerios we used to eat in the 80s. They're still Cheerios, but they have 40 more ingredients now. Like, so how do you advise people while they're living these demanding lives and, high performing professionals, let's say, how do you advise them on that as far as this food specifically and eating healthy?
Yeah.
It's a big question. But.
Huge question, right? And this is another reason I wrote the book, right?
Yeah.
Because it's so obvious when you look out in the landscape of our food environment today. I don't love the word toxic, but how challenging it is. As you said, like we're drowning in information. And first, some of that is sifting through like good quality information and then sort of like misinformation or just things that have become recycled so many times on social media to the point where like it's not quite true or not quite accurate. You know, and I often joke that like everything in your fridge is either gonna heal you or kill you. And sometimes it's even the same thing in just different quantities at different times can have drastically different effects on our body. So like this makes it such a complex topic, which is why I love getting into it. And so let me just like bounce the question back for you two, because obviously, you know, like what is most challenging for you in terms of your own eating, you know, when it comes to this?
For me, my whole life have been highly addicted to sugar, like severely addicted. And now everywhere I turn and read, it is saying that is the number one cause for cancer, right? Because it allows cancer cells to just actually like breed off of that. So then you read things about, oh, if you do a 72-hour fast, or if you do this, or if you do that, you can actually help kill those like blood cells that are cancer causing cells or something. So for me, that's been something I've been trying to remove that from my diet as much as possible. And I do think it's helping. I think that it's, you know, the less you eat it, the less you crave it, right? So it does help, but that takes an insane amount of the perfect storm energy, right? Like it's like I can't be super stressed. I can't, you know, my menstrual cycle has to be in a perfect spot, right? For me to not just cave and be like, fine, I'm gonna crush all those peanut M&Ms that I just had before you arrived. But you know, it's one of those things where it's like, I don't know, ever since I was a kid, that's my sweet tooth.
Yeah.
And something, not to keep going with this, but something that's really interesting for me is raising 2 twin daughters and just seeing that, okay, this isn't just me. Like I became this adult who's obsessed with sugar. One of my kids loves sugar, loves desserts, and my other kid is completely a savory. Like all she wants is healthy, good food. That's it. She doesn't even want desserts, doesn't even have an interest in them, won't even take a bite of cake, right? If we're at a birthday party. And you start to see that it's like, well, some of this like is definitely just them, like who they are, right? And like then a lot of it is how they're being raised too. So, you know, you got to have this like healthy relationship on accepting that like you can have some sugar without feeling guilt, but then also at the same time there's an excessive amount. And I think for me, when there's stress involved, that is absolutely, I'm not somebody who drinks a lot, I don't smoke, so that has been like my thing. That, you know, they have like all these memes now that it's you have a tough day and you go outside and you just crush a cannoli or you crush a piece of cake, right? And it's like that's more my thing. That's how I like manage my stress, is go for sugar.
Yeah. And like, how is that working out for you right now?
I mean, I have diabetes. No, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. Well, I almost had gestational diabetes when I was pregnant. No, but it's working out okay. I think it's more just the concern of I don't want my kids to have a ton of sweets and sugar in the house because I would love to try and help them to not have this same thing. I do feel like at times it's, you know, I can have like a sugar withdrawal when I'm really going through like a period of time of like eating a ton of sugar. And then as I get older and older, it's harder to maintain your weight. And also you start to just feel sluggish and not as good when you know that you're taking in things like that are just not healthy. You're not processing them well. And I think that it definitely, they say you are what you eat. So obviously I'm very sweet. But no, but I
Love it. Yeah.
honestly, guys, I just came up with it. But it is one of those things where I do think that as I'm losing energy as I get older and I'm losing as much, I guess, like willpower that I used to have for maintaining such a healthy lifestyle because I don't have as much time because I am a parent and I work hard. I think that for me, I've really learned diet has to be on point because I just don't have time for the other things. So like that's something, again, I can control it. Like I can actually control my diet a lot better than I can control the time in my day or the ability to get a workout in or things like that. So
there's so many good things. Like, so what you just shared was really rich. So let me try to just kind of summarize maybe 3 or 4 like key points that I heard you say. And I wish I had some notes because now I'm taxing my cognitive memory. One is around parents, right? And how our kids are going to mirror back our own relationship with food. And for me, that was so salient. You know, I wanted to work on my relationship with food so that I didn't pass on any of these disordered behaviors to my son, you know, and so like that became an additional motivating factor without a doubt, in making sure that I could, you know, raise him in a, you know, a wholesome, healthy food environment. Second thing around, you know, I think the piece that you're talking about of stress, and how that impacts our eating is so, so, so important. And another reason that I wrote this book was to try to shift the conversation. Because I think most of the time when we're talking about nutrition and food, we're talking about the food, right? Too much sugar, too many refined carbs, too processed, right? And we get hyper focused on good food, bad food, healthy, unhealthy, right? And while, yes, the food matters, we miss the whole rest of the story, which is what's happening inside of us before that food ever even hits our mouth. Right. And so I like to talk about not just what you're eating, but who you are as an eater. Are you the type of person that reaches for some peanut M&Ms every time life gets really stressful? Right. And how are you eating that? Are you eating it in this stressed way? Are you eating it mindlessly? Are you eating it while you're doing something else? Are you eating it standing up in the cupboard, hiding, that sort of thing? So it's really trying to go upstream to think about, what is happening internally in me that then leads downstream to the food choices that I'm making. And I find that if we can work on that internal relationship first, then the downstream choices that we make just become so much easier. And there's less of this fretting and fighting over, is this the right thing or not right thing? Which kind of goes to the next point of, I think this question of enough. What is enough? How do I know when I've eaten enough? Is really essential and really, really difficult. One is difficult because modern ultra-processed food makes that point of enough feel like this goalpost that keeps moving further and further away. And it's designed to be that way. The food is formulated to give us this huge sensation and pleasure in our mouth without ever making us feel full. And in the book, the whole first part of the book, I really go into the mechanisms that, food science uses to create foods that are like that. But then a lot of it is also psychological, right? What is enough is like, what do I expect this food to make me feel in terms of portion sizes, right? Like if I look at a tiny little bit of food, I'm going to say, oh, that's not enough. But if I look at a big bite, that's enough. Or if I look at a steak, that's enough. But if I look at a salad, that's not enough. So our preconceptions of what enough is and what our expectations are also play a huge role in how much we end up eating. And then there's this piece of, eating to the point where you're no longer hungry versus eating to the point when you feel full. And those two things are actually different. And I think most people, right, stop eating when either two things happen, right? The food itself is gone, right? Plate is clean, bag is empty, or they're getting like these super clear signals. They're like, oh my God, I'm really full. Like, time to stop eating, right? However, there is this whole other gray space before then when like that hunger is gone, right? Your body has gotten enough energy, information, calories, nutrients. It's saying, okay, right, but I'm still not really full, right? And so stopping there in that place of enoughness, I think, is actually really a useful skill to practice and develop. But most of us have never gotten any guidance on how to do that, because most of how we've learned how to eat just either comes passively through our families or through media. And so this is where thinking of eating as a skill that you can actually build and refine and improve, I think really helps people gain more agency of like, oh yeah, I can actually get better at this. And as a result, I can do a better job feeding myself. And as a result of that, I can wake up with more energy. And I can wake up feeling better about my body and how I look and how it performs. Because as you said, the older we get, like the more the impacts of these habits have on our well-being. Like I said, you can't get away with those things that you could get away with when you were a lot younger. And so, I think paying attention to that, it's another thing that I think people really struggle with is a lot of our eating habits, were the things that worked for us last year, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. It's very hard to update your eating, until something significant happens. Either you get a diagnosis from the doctor, or you start developing some sort of heartburn, or you have some sort of insomnia, or you have a child, or something happens. It's like there's these moments all of a sudden where like your body says, hold on a second, like we can't keep doing it the same way we were doing it. Those are these kind of wake up moments where it's then possible to go back and say, okay, let's revisit. What needs to change here.
I love the way you describe the difference between eating until you're full versus eating until you're not hungry.
Yeah.
And that gray area is huge. I need to maybe do the not hungry one instead of the full one from now on.
Well, that would require you to stop ordering as many appetizers.
That's true.
but-
I don't know. No guarantee.
No, but you know
What
what?
do you-
So sorry, but
Go ahead.
what's interesting about that, one thing that I wonder, and because you are coaching a lot of different men from different, careers, right? Like, so different industries and like their day to day might look different.
Yeah.
So, for example, my husband, he's in a hospital all day long, so he's in an operating room quite often, and he can't just like bring food with him, right? He can't bring a lunch. There's nowhere to pack it. There's no options. You basically can only get to the cafeteria if you can get to the cafeteria. Whereas for us here, it's like, oh, well, like I can graze all day long. Like, so I like grazing because that's my preferred method of eating, because I will overeat. Like, I will clean that plate, because I came from a household of like, you need to clean your plate kind of a thing if you want dessert, which is another thing. They treated it like a reward, which I know I'm not supposed to do that with my kids. But so it is something where, as I'm trying to have more mindfulness towards when I eat, right? Like, I know if I get on the phone, I could easily scarf down a ton of food while I'm talking because I'm not paying attention. It's mindless eating,
Yeah.
right? I don't like to eat while I watch TV, mindless eating. I know I'll just like endlessly eat because I'm doing two things at once, right? So you're not focusing on it. But what do you do with people that really truly do have a job where it's like, it's kind of a feast or famine type environment where it's, you have to eat, get really full, because then this might have to last you several hours because you don't have a chance to graze or to have something small, a snack in between. How do you manage that?
Yeah.
And changing
So
the mindset.
you're
on it?
asking on behalf of your husband.
Not just that, but like even like there are days
Yeah.
where, I'll even say to my kids, right? They have these small little tiny bellies, and I'm like, well, we're going to be out for the next 4 hours. Like, you need to pack a snack, or you need to have this, or you need to have that. Because I have this fear that they're going to have a mental breakdown in the middle of wherever we are because they're hungry. And for me, though, I also don't want to mess with their mindset of food. But like, I want them to understand that like, you do have to make sure that you're eating, not to the point of being sick, but like filling your body with the nutrients it needs to give you the energy it needs, right? So I guess it's just trying to understand, how do you navigate that as an
Yeah.
adult?
I'm curious. I'm just wondering, like, does your husband, has he found a solution that works for him? Like, is this something that
No.
you think is a challenge for him, or does he complain about it?
He doesn't complain about it, but he definitely like will go many, many hours without eating. And then he comes home and he'll like eat a meal, then snack the rest of the night. Cause it's like he hadn't eaten all day.
Look, first and foremost, I'll say as a parent, right? Like, I know the danger of leaving the house without snacks
Yeah.
seems like, oh my God, what did I just do, right? And we've had those moments, where your kid is freaking out and hungry, and you're like, I don't have anything. That happened yesterday on the playgrounds. And I want to kind of put this in a little bit of a historical context. The way we currently view eating as sort of this constantly available, around the clock, is actually much more of a modern trend than I think most people really realize. That for most of human history, and even up until probably the 1970s-ish, right, snacks were few and far in between. Like, they didn't really exist. A snack was literally just like, if you had so much hunger, it was just a tiny little something to tide you over to get to that next meal. And now we've kind of entered this realm of what I call sort of the snackification of America, where now we have said, oh, eating is not only appropriate, but encouraged from basically the moment you wake up to the moment you go to bed. It's like you can be eating doing anything. Like, outside of maybe sex, and I'm sure people even do it then, it's like you can basically be eating while you're working, while you're driving,
Is that part in the book?
Actually, the entire, I think it's the 3rd chapter, I talk a lot about how the rhythms of eating have changed over the generations. And so, and to what you were saying of like, hey, I kind of like to graze. And this isn't about grazing or not grazing. It's not about having 3 square meals or 1 meal. It's just about understanding the context of like, when food is always available, we are just more likely to eat more. That is just sort of the bottom line. That is like, as supply increases, demand is going to go up, whether you want it to or not. And I think you can look at, look at our nation and the data in terms of body weight and other things over the last 50 years. So kind of to get back to your question around, what do you do? I think it's really hard when you have a job, and I'd love to hear more about you two as well, because like, you're out and about, you're on calls, you're showing clients homes, these sort of things, right? Where it's hard to have a regular eating rhythm. right? Like where it's like, hey, I know I'm going to, have lunch every day, generally between 12 and noon, sort of thing, where it's like, oh, I might not have time for that. What do you do? And so this is the value of one-on-one coaching, is that I can work with people at the hyper individual level of like, yeah, tell me what a day in your life looks like. What does a week look like? So how can we begin to get more proactive rather than reactive around this food? And some of it is smart prep and these sort of things, but to your point, it's like, if I can't bring my food with me, then I have another constraint. So these are hard. I will say that the body is incredibly adaptable. And if you go back, you'll say that, hey, for most of human history, we lived in this kind of feast and famine environment, where there would be periods, where there was lots of food available, and sometimes that would last a day or weeks or months, and then we'd be periods where there wasn't. And our bodies are actually incredibly good at carrying us through this. And we've sort of unlearned a lot of that because of this snackification where like we're always eating, which I think is one reason why fasting has kind of come back into vogue as a way of reclaiming some of that. And there are some real metabolic benefits we could talk about to like going through fasting periods. But I think at the same, it's sort of the psychological level, just being able to trust that like, hey, I can go 6 hours, 10 hours without eating. I'm going to be okay. I'm not going to die. I think there's this feeling, I'd say most eating problems start with the belief, I'm not okay. At some level, I'm not okay. This doesn't feel okay. Something is not okay. Then leads to all sorts of weird things happening with food later on. I'm not okay. I'm not going to be able to eat. Let me eat a lot now. I overeat now. Now I don't feel good. Oh, I'm still not okay. And let me eat some more because I don't feel okay, right? Like it can spiral in a lot of ways. The last thing I'll say is our bodies are also incredibly good at getting what they need to survive. Right. So to your husband's point, like even if he doesn't eat all day, he comes home, he has a meal, he's snacking. My guess is that his body has figured out how to get the right amount of calories and the right amount of nutrients to keep him at a pretty base level of health. Is that true?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
He seems like it's
he's getting by.
It's like
He's
I think coming
surviving.
back to that wisdom of like our bodies are really, really smart, and when we try to get really like heady about it and of like I'm gonna manipulate this thing and try to control here, I'm gonna restrict here. Believe me, so many times I have tried in the past of like, oh, I'm gonna have this super indulgent dinner, right? So I'm not gonna eat anything all day because I want to save up my calories, and then at the end, not only do I end up eating way more than I would have ate if I had breakfast, but like it's like when we try to micromanage the calorie math, it often backfires. Right. And this is something that I think obviously it depends on the person. And, and if you have a disordered relationship with food, is that much more important to really be aware of when that tracking can become problematic. On the other hand, I think it can be really helpful for people to track how much they're eating, to have a food log, to get a basic understanding of like, hey, on any given day, where is my calories coming from? So building that level of kind of nutritional awareness, I think, is another part of becoming a more skilled eater.
Off of that, you talk about, I believe in your book and so on, is like practical eating without these rigid requirements that most diets have. So what are some like practical things that, anyone can do to kind of make sure that they're being a little bit more healthy, compounding those healthy eating habits? What can they do?
So in the book, first, I kind of give a short little kind of 3-question test of how do you know when a food has been engineered to kind of hijack your best intentions. And is it the food irresistible, effortless, and endless? Right? So is the food formulated, right, to be so freaking good, right? That the flavor dust on the Dorito chips. I don't know, Ryan, what's some of your favorite?
I mean, Doritos are really good. But I could just go with like crackers. I could do wheat thins all day.
Okay.
And like just carbs,
See, like
crackers.
salt.
It's salt.
So, certain things are designed, at the very molecular level to be irresistible. The way they kind of take over our pleasure receptors in terms of the chemicals in our bodies that they're helping stimulate both dopamine and endogenous opioids. Like we're literally getting this chemical rush of like, oh, this feels really, really good. And in my mouth, this tastes really, really good. Oh, I want more, right? So is the food designed to be irresistible? Is it designed to be effortless in the sense of, hand to mouth. I can be over here. I can be scrolling. I can be watching, right? There's no preparation. I just need to crack open another box. So it's just so easy to consume. And then is it designed to be endless? And endless can take a few different shapes and forms. Endless in the sense of gigantic portions, right? That family-sized bag of chips that actually has like 58 servings in it. Endless can be in terms of variety, like when you walk into the supermarket and you see the yogurt aisle and there's like 35 flavors of yogurt, but they're all essentially the same yogurt. And it's really just, some pretty actually incredible modern food science. And it's a manipulation of your senses using natural and artificial flavors to just make this one yogurt taste like peach cobbler and this other yogurt taste like cookies and cream, when it's basically the same yogurt with different sorts of terpenes and flavorings and other things. So that's another sign that the food is kind of potentially going to be working against you. And so I like to say is like, just take a look on any given day at how much of the food that you're eating has been designed to be irresistible, effortless, and endless, right? That's a sign that maybe the food itself is something that you can work on. You can make some healthier swaps and upgrades, right? Coming back to a more kind of whole food diet. Now, this isn't about, eliminating ultra-processed food. It's about how do we live in an environment where this stuff is everywhere and relate to it more skillfully, because it's not going away. And I think it's impractical to ask people to cut out. I don't want to take away your M&Ms. I don't want to take away your wheat thins. Again, it's about how am I relating to them? Because when we have foods that are irresistible, effortless, and endless, it essentially removes all of the natural guardrails that our evolution has designed to regulate our food intake. So now we're eating without any natural, regulation, and that just leads to more complicated overeating and other problems. So that's one thing that I kind of talk about in the book. And then the other piece that I think is really crucial is just understanding which part of you is doing the eating. Who is eating? Is it the part of me that just really wants some pleasure because I love the flavor of the cracker in my mouth? Is it the part of me that is just looking to survive because I haven't eaten all day because I've been so busy working and I'm just ravenous? Is it the part of me that is eating because the rest of my family is eating, or I'm out with other friends and there's a social component, so it's time to eat because other people are eating, so I must be eating too, or other people ordered another drink, so I must order another drink, right? Or is there a strategic part of me that says, hey, I'm eating this because I want to get some more fiber in my diet, or I'm eating this because I think, I need some more protein, right? So understanding which part of you is doing the eating leads to this more holistic sense of like, oh yeah, I have these different parts. They want different things. They show up at different times. And I think the real challenge is that most of us are completely unaware of any of this happening. And yet when we can begin to see these parts, we don't have to be them. And then we can actually lead them to more skillful and wholesome ways of eating instead of being drugged around by every little impulse that says, feed me now, I'm starving, I'm hungry, give me pleasure, they're eating, right? And it's like this just leads to this internal conflict. And so, this is what I describe as eating 2.0 is coming into this new upgraded relationship with ourselves in relationship to food, where we can be the leader of our hunger, the leader of our urges, as opposed to feeling like we're always being drugged around by them.
That's really good. I can see how, one-on-one coaching with you, where you're teaching someone on a very specific level how to rebuild their trust with food in that regard and establish really good habits around food. I can see how that would be very, very helpful. That was good.
It's also interesting too, as you're talking about all this stuff, it's similar to how even like we coach people on our team in business, right? So what it is it's you're training yourself to be a little less on autopilot, less multitasking all the time, which we actually have just recently had this conversation about it. And the more you're multitasking, stressed, and just kind of living on autopilot for all things that you do, the more you're struggling with being really good at all those things, right? So it's, I think in general, like a lot of us are doing this regularly now with every aspect of our lives because of the fact that everything is so convenient. I find for me, eating a lot of times is more an autopilot thing. It's convenience. So when you listed those 3 questions, I thought to myself, oh, for me, it's kind of the second one, right? I think it was number 2 of the questions that you had asked. And I'm like,
effortless.
I'm going for the effortless all the time.
Yeah.
In a sense of, I've never really had time. I'm always running out the door in the morning. I, don't have a ton of time when I get home or whatever it might be. Also, it's not where I want to put my time. Because that's the other piece of it too. Like, I don't want to sit there and chop up a bunch of fruit and vegetables before, I can eat something. I want something that is convenient and effortless, right? So I think it's just retraining yourself, like the meal prepping, pre-cutting things. When my kids were babies, I had to pre-cut all their fruit. Well, that was super convenient then. It was easy to just grab fruit and feed them the good vegetables and the good fruit when it was already cut up ahead of time. So I think it's just like reprogramming yourself to do a little bit of that work so you then don't start continuing down the same path that hasn't been working, right? And we kind of talk about this at work all the time too, where it's like, if you just continue to do the same thing on autopilot and you're not evolving and you're not kind of starting to change your techniques, you're never going to see any difference. You're never going to see any growth. And for this, it's lifestyle growth, right? Because I do think that whether it's our age or whether it's the fact that foods are even more processed than they ever were before, it's you just don't feel as good if you're not feeding your body the proper nutrients and actually like getting those whole foods. And I think that, again, it's probably because I'm pushing 40. I'll be 40 next month. But it's one of those things where it's like you just start to realize and like take an assessment of your life of like, I don't want to keep doing this. Like, I could just do it better. Why not?
Yeah.
Like, why not feed my body like foods that are going to make me feel really good? You wake up feeling so much better in the morning and like it just gives you more energy when you need it and stuff like that. So I think it's just trying to make it now, how do I make the food convenient, right?
Yeah,
How do I make it effortless? And it's going to take a little bit more prep or things like that, but it will pay off in the end.
Yeah. I mean, I love what you're saying. The proof is in the pudding.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, and hopefully it's like wholesome chia pudding, right?
Yeah.
But right.
The healthy pudding.
The healthy pudding, right? Of
Mhm.
course. But to your point, when you begin to see what your life can be like when you actually feed yourself in a way that works for your body.
Mhm.
And that might not be exactly what the media says is the right way to eat or what your influencers are eating and, online. It takes a lot of trial and error, takes a lot of experimentation, and it takes a lot of awareness. So your point about shifting, right? And I talk about kind of 3 shifts, right? Shift from autopilot to aware, shift from reactive eating to proactive eating, and then also then shift from kind of living habitually to living intentionally. And these things go way beyond food, right? And this is where it's like the coaching that I do, right, focuses a lot on food, focuses a lot on health, but this is really about everything in your life, right? Because it starts with our own relationship to our body. And when our body is feeling, in a place where it's like it's working with us instead of against us, like then we're so much more capable of going out and doing things for others, being of service, doing good work in the world, like just showing up as our more loving, present selves. Like at the end of the day, that's what really, really matters. It's not about hitting some sort of perfect macros or doing some specific workout. It's like having the capacity, the energy, the presence to show up in the world in a way that is aligned and feels like you are giving your best self to everybody, including yourself, right? Including your body. And I think we often shortchange our bodies, and maybe we give so much of ourselves to our clients or to our families, and then we neglect our bodies. And to me, that's really just undermining this whole endeavor.
Right. That's really interesting way you put it. It's like what you eat and what you talk about in Eating 2.0, your new book, is how what you're putting in your body can actually make a huge impact on your life, not just health-wise, but giving more energy, giving more time to your family. All of those things, it's just compounds so drastically. And obviously you teaching graduate courses in mindful leadership and psychology at Harvard, that gives you just another layer of things to talk about. It's not just about the psychology and the actual breakdown of food, et cetera, that you can coach people on, but it's also the mindfulness, which plays so much into it. So it's really impressive. Like, what would you say? We've talked about a lot, and we could talk about this for hours. I'm like, I want to hear all the different things, whether it be myths that we're hearing online or what's true, what's not true. I'm sure we could talk for days about that. But like, what's 1 or 2 things that we maybe haven't touched on that you would love our listeners to hear, regarding everything we've talked about or something we haven't?
Yeah. I think there's one important piece that kind of undergirds all of this work, and I've spent the last decade helping people develop healthier habits. Right? And yes, it's important to have the right systems and structures. Yes, it's important to have the right foods around, but at the end of the day, none of this stuff sticks until you feel safe enough in your body to actually do the thing that you say you want to do. And this becomes really hard because a lot of the quote unhealthy habits or the unwanted habits that we do actually provide us a sense of safety. And so we need to rewire our nervous systems to recognize that we can actually let go of that behavior and do this other one that we really want to be doing, whether that's, not mindlessly snacking at the end of the night, or whether that's going to bed earlier, or whether that's, some sort of exercise or movement. It's like, until that feels safe enough to do that alternative, then we're going to keep defaulting back to this old piece. So there is a lot of nervous system healing that really needs to happen. Otherwise, we're always just going to be working at the level of kind of behavior and symptoms, and we never really get down to the level of like, hey, there's a part of me that's choosing to do this because it's actually serving an important purpose for me. It's helping me regulate. Now, that could be coming from something that happened a really, really long time ago. It could be coming from part of my childhood, from some story that I've been carrying, from something that I inherited from family or other pieces. So like there's a lot of that kind of cleaning up work that comes into play here. And it's like when we can do that cleaning up work, when we can help work with our nervous systems to feel safe, and then we have the right external supports and the good routines to support that healthy lifestyle, then we can really create sustainable transformation. And like that is what I care most about. Because otherwise, the 30-day, detox fix, you can get some good things out of that, but it's probably not going to stick, right? And it's like, I want that version of both of you that we had, 3, 5, 10, 30 years from now to be able to wake up and feel healthy and happy about who you are and what you're doing in the world.
Wow.
Yeah.
Brilliantly said. That was
I
awesome.
know. Honestly, there's been so many amazing takeaways from this conversation. I also have a million more questions that I'll ask you after the fact. But I do think that ultimately, if somebody wants to get in touch with you and they want to continue a conversation like this and learn a little bit more, because like you said, there's so much that you kind of need to actually put into the intention behind a healthy lifestyle and eating, unprocessed living, right? Like that kind of thing, so you can live your best life. I think that that's something where, whether it's the coaching, whether it's reading your book, let us know how can someone get in touch with you? What's the first step?
Yeah. First step is checking out my website,
Okay.
Jeff Siegel Wellness. I've got a lot of resources there. You can shoot me a message and you can set up a time to chat. I love to get to have conversations with people and really I want to understand where you're at, what's getting in the way, and then if working together would be a good fit.
That's awesome.
Nice.
So reach out, jeffsiegelwellness.com or at Jeff Siegel Wellness on Instagram.
Yep.
It's been a pleasure you coming in. We can't tell you how much we appreciate it. I learned a lot, and I know you did as well, and it's inspirational stuff you do, and thanks for sharing your story.
Yeah, you're welcome.
We really appreciate it. So
Yeah. Thank you
you
both.
so
I
much.
know. Thank you so much. This
Very
was
welcome.
great.